your anointing upon this hour of instruction. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. Welcome to Lesson 5 as we continue on in the subject of church finance. Let's go to the board and do a little review as we keep ourselves abreast of what we're doing. In the course on church finance, we are breaking it down into 3 basic areas. The principles of finance, of which we discussed 4, getting ourselves ready with the ethic and the theology of church finance and our responsibility in handling money and all the affairs and properties of God. Now we're presently in the procedures area, and we're talking about how this is done, giving you some basic nuts and bolts on how to keep books and working out the procedures of church finance. In the further lessons, we're going to be looking at the practice of church finance, handling the money, learning how to be sensitive to God, how to be accurate in the accounting, and doing the work with the presence of the Lord in our lives. The procedures of church finance. We started out last lesson, as you recall, talking about the administration principles. The aspect of getting a church charter for a non-profit corporation, how that we are responsible for recording that. That gives us a legal identity with the government and all other businesses so that they know we're reputable and that are indeed a serious organization. It is non-profit. It needs to be recorded. Then we relate ourselves to the federal government because of employment situations. We get a federal employment number which excludes us, if you will, from being taxed, and also allows those who give donations into the ministry to have a tax-deductible item for their income tax. Then we need to record it in the county or the parish in which we reside in each area that our ministry is effective, and so we take care of those legal areas. Then we discussed the budget formatting, the actual building of a church financial system, and constructing a chart of accounts. Now, the first thing we needed to do was to discover our real income. And then set up a priority list so that we know which items are going to be top and foremost on our budget. And then we make and take an inventory of our assets and our liabilities. Now with these figures all ascertained, we're ready now to go in and do a work. We worked a while on the chart of accounts, showing how that by using a number, we can shorten our remarks and codes and make it a lot more brief and simple, not cluttering up the pages and the remarks of our income, so that we can identify every expenditure and deduct it, of course, from the proper place. This gives us a great accuracy in the handling and the reporting of the finances of the church and the ministry of the Lord. And we carried you through the various series. The assets, we have to categorize them. And remember, we put those in the 100 series. Let's just make a little room here on the board and we'll start working. And then we measured our assets. And we gave them. This is what you have right now. The money in the bank. The money that you are having as your real income as we establish it. And then we had to take into account our liabilities and those things that we owe, our mortgages, our payments that we're making. We have vehicles or what have you. Those monies that we're paying out on a regular basis are liabilities. We do not own them yet. It's not like a utility bill. You never own anything there. You're just paying for service. But a liability is something that you are claiming as your own property, but yet it has not been paid for. Then we have to take our equities. And this is our inventories of all things, our equities. These are the inventories of everything we own, buildings and the furnishings within the buildings, equipment and road equipment, all kinds of ministerial equipment, missionary equipment, anything that we have that is worth something that we have purchased and are using for the church and the ministry. These are our equities. If you were to have to report in case of loss or theft or fire, then they would want to know what you owned, what was destroyed, what it was worth, and you have to discern that by measuring what it initially cost, how old it is, and what good repair it is, and find out an equitable point. But this is your value. See, you're responsible for this before the Lord, and it adds to your total financial picture if you're going to go and borrow money, because this is your worth, or part of your worth. And then the next thing that we looked at, and we broke it down in the 500 to the 900 series, and this was your area of your income. I believe it was our 400 series. How we receive our monies, tithes, offerings. We may have refunds from power companies or stores, any way that you derive an income or could get money into the church. Then it has to be accounted for, and we put it in the income bracket. The interest on bank accounts, if this is what you're having, or building funds, or any other funds, missionary monies, if you're handling monies for missionaries. All of these are your income as the money comes in. And then we had the operating expenses, and this is your large one, where you're going to break it down, your operating expenses. And we numbered these from, let me get that spelled correctly here, I'm trying to talk and write at the same time, from 500 to 900, and we gave each category a number for income. We have your missions account, we have our ministry account, your salaries and your housing allowances and those things, those operating expenses. Then your general operation in your church, your maintenance and your equipment, and having your equipment worked on, your office supplies and your office equipment, and your postage and utilities and activities and entertainment, on and on. The list goes. Any way that you spend money, we're going to give it an account number so that we can identify it and keep it cataloged correctly. Now, with all of this done, we've got ourselves built up now. We know our real monies. We have our accounts all figured out. We've got them each with a number. Now, we're going to spend a few minutes now going in and looking how that we're going to set up and format a general ledger. Now, you understand that the format is going to be your own individual device, but there are certain areas and categories that you need to consider that will help us in our adequate bookkeeping. Now again, I remind you that if you're on a computer system, all of this is built within the program itself, and all you have to do is get to that point and punch in the figures, and it does all the correlating work for you automatically. And that's a handy device for sure. The difference between writing everything in by hand and then having at the end of the month or weekly, trying to keep your columns and everything added up correctly, and then you get your bank statement in and you're off 38 cents, and so you've got to trace through the whole month's expenditures and incomes, trying to find out who or where that 38 cents happened to be or go. And so whichever way, we're going to have to devise a way that we can keep our books balanced. This is called the general ledger, where we're going to mark down and inscribe all of our expenditures and incomes, every financial transaction. And so it'll look something like this. If you have a great big double entry financial record book and you're doing it by hand, we've done that for many years. Or if you're going to use a computer system, either way, the first column that you're probably going to have to deal with, and that is the date. The date. We have to be wondering when we paid a certain bill. It's good also to have some time and place and record for the account number, and if you need, and if there is one, an invoice number. You're paying a certain invoice, and so you would need to care for that. But the first thing you need to do is your date, and you may want to divide that with your date, the 12th month, you see, or the 12th day of the month for the third month and for the year, this year 88. And there's your date for your expenditures. And then if you have an invoice number, you would add that if you're going to put it in brackets or have a special column for it, an invoice number. and you'd have that if there is one, and you can put that down. Then we're going to have our expenses and income put down. Expenses. This is all across the page. Now, as we start, we're going to, first of all, at the first of the month, we were going to enter in our time here on the first day of the third month of the year. We write in our income, and we're going to give a balance of the account or the set of accounts that we have. And so the general fund, this book, the General Ledger, now is incorporating your general fund, and that number, remember, was 110, the general fund, all incomes coming in, tithes and offerings. Most of your income is going to come in and go right into this fund, so I give a number. See, this is the place where it is, and the balance of that for this date, as we start off the new month, we give it. Now I've got some figures written down here, and we'll just take a look at these just so that we can give a hypothetical book. Let's assume now that your balance is going to be $12,404.07. This is your balance. This is what you have in the bank as you begin this month before any offerings are further taken and received, any other monies coming in or going out. So we record that so that we know that we have this on income. This is not an expense. Now, one of the things you're going to do is, as you get your offerings in on Sunday morning, Sunday night, or whenever, you're going to also put a date here on the second of this month. You're going to put in your monies as it comes in. Now this is your income, and remember your income was in the 400 series, so we began to look at that, and this is tithes and offerings, and remember we assigned that number for tithes and offerings so that any time that we look and see 410, we know that that's an income, not an outgo, an income of tithes and offerings. And that offering, and we put down here on deposit slip number 1, the amount. And for that week, we got 1,300, or that offering, whatever it was, whatever we're counting, $318.82. And then further on in that week, on the midweek service, on the 5th of the month, we received another offering. We put that in now, and that's 410, and this deposit slip, so we can keep record now of when it was, the date, and the deposit slip number 2 for that month, or the number 2, or whatever it is. You may be way down here. This may be 21 and 22, or maybe 205 and 206. Whatever it is, your deposit slip number, we're keeping them in chronological order now. And that offering happened to be at $2,001 and for 12 cents. Now, these are the offerings. Now, we can't go through a whole month and all of the expenditures, but I'm showing you how that we put on the page what we're doing so we can keep up with it. Now, we have the date that this transaction took place. We have the account number, what kind of this is. This happens to be an income account, and it happens to be for tithes and offerings. And we made a deposit, and I just used the code deposit slip number 22 for $2,001.12. Now, that's recorded in the book, and we have all of that information. Now, in the meantime, you're spending money. And say on the 3rd, you wrote out a salary check. And so now we go over here to the expense side, and each of those expenses areas, there's going to be numbers. See, we're going to have a 501 and a 500 and a 510, and on it'll go. And for the sake of my diagram here, so we can keep correlated with our chart of accounts, we're going to have here a 510 and a 511. And on across the page as it goes, we are going to have all of our accounts and how we expend them. Each account is going to have a place on your page or in your computer. Of course, it's all in the program. And each account, each chart of account number, so that you can pick it and use it, you're going to sign it there. Now, what we did, we wrote out a salary on the 3rd here of the month. We wrote out a salary in 510 check. This is in outgo expenses, and we paid $475 that week out. So that's an expense. We got income, we got outgo, expense. Now, also that night service, we had somebody come in, and we gave them in 511, if you'll recall, that's the honorarium account, and we paid them for a service $100. That's what you're doing. Then the next week, of course, and you have a date here, and on the 12th of the month, we have here another salary check in 510, and we record that check, that money that's going out. And we have, and you just go on. Every item in your chart of account, every item in your budget that you're spending that month, going across the page under its particular number at the date in which it was taken out or brought in, we have it there on that line. So in immediate, anytime, I can look at the books and know, hey, I've spent this, or I've gotten this amount of money in, and I've got all of this worked out and on the page. Now, when you get ready at the end of the month, these things have got to be tallied. And so let's assume now we're just going to shorten our books here just for the sake of time and for board space here. We're going to get our totals now. We're going to add up and see what we've got going at the end of the month. And so at the end of the month, on the 31st day of the 3rd month in 88, we have here a total. And if you add those things up, we have taken in on 2 deposit slips a sum total now of $3,019, $319 and some 94 cents. Then we go up here and we take our balance and we bring that down. And so our balance brought forward, this is our income, this is our balance brought forward. And as you recall, that we started up here, and that's your balance up here. That was some $12,000 and $404.07, and we had that as a balance, and those things are added up and they give us our grand total, or our GT, and that figure happens to be $15,724.01. There we have it. Now, we've got the money. What we took in, our income for the month was $3,319.94. We brought our balance down and added it to it so we can keep ourselves straight, and added our $12,404.07 balance, giving us a grand total of monies in the bank that we have taken in, and the money we already have there, $15,724.01. Now we have to go over here on this side of the book and do the same thing. Now we're going to add up our total expenses, our TE here, and it's going to be $950 in this account, and $100 in this account. And then when we add those up, our total expenses is going to come and amount to $1,050.00. Now, basically, we would go ahead and take now, we have spent that month $1,050. We're going to take it from the $15,724.01, and of course that will give us a March balance at the end of the month, a final balance here as we record that of $14,674.01. $14,674.01. This is what we have. Now, keep up with me. We added these up and got our balance. We added our previous balance, got the total balance. We came over here and added up all of our expenses. In this column, the 510 column was $950. This total here was $100, and on down through the page. Then our total expenses for the month, all of these added up together, amounted to $1,050. Now we subtract that from our grand total, and we come up with now we should have in the bank $14,674.01. Now your bank statement comes in and it tells you now that's what you have in the bank and your books are balanced. Now, one other thing that you're going to consider for your financial report, then you're going to add, you see here, your total assets to this figure. And your total assets to your figure, you've made an inventory and all the monies that you have, all the properties that you have, everything that you own now, you add that worth to it, and your assets happen to be $974. And then we have to go over and on this side add up all of our liabilities. That's all the monies we still owe for the building or for the vehicles or whatever it is that we're buying. And that figure happens to be $33,641.32. Now, when we add your assets to your balance and then subtract over here your liabilities from it, then we have a realistic figure of your net worth in every capacity. That figure happens to be $54,920.69. And so by that we can see that we take our grand total, our balance for the month, and we write that figure out. Then we have to come in and write in our total assets. And then we write in our total liabilities. And then we subtract that, or add those up and subtract and put that in. And then this gives us our financial statement for that month. We are worth this amount of figure right here. And like I said, when you put your figures together, it was $53,929.69. Now, with this figure, this is your final net worth. This is what the organization, your church, is worth completely. If we were to take it out, lock, stock, and barrel, and sell it for what it's worth, that's the figure for what it would be. And that's everything. That's the debts that you have, the furniture in the building, everything. Now, these figures are just arbitrary, and you keep yourself abreast. And these things will change and fluctuate as you add and increase properties. As you increase indebtedness, it's going to change the figures. Of course, the big figure that you're wanting right now, and this is the figure you're operating with, is your balance for March. That is your balance from February added to your income and outgo for the month of March, and we end up and we put it in the column up here in the start of the April books. We have that figure of some $15,000 for our general, or $14,000, $674.01 for our balance. That's the operating figure. That's the money you have to work with in the books. I pray now that we can get some idea of how that we're going to put these things on the printed page and keep abreast with what's going. Now, there's some practical suggestions in doing this, and we need to keep those in mind as we think about accurate bookkeeping. You need someone appointed to do this if you're not going to do it yourself. If you're a very small church, and as you begin, it may be well and feasible, you're the only one that is around to do it. So you need to know about bookkeeping. You may have a CPA in your congregation that would be volunteering his services to offer and keep the books. You may have someone who is an accountant or just a good bookkeeper, and they're willing to do that. That's fine. But you need to know about bookkeeping yourself so you'll know what they're doing and be able to think and carry on correct business procedures and operations. So we need to know something about bookkeeping and keeping the page And we ought to do this, and we ought to keep our books abreast no less than weekly. Don't let that work pile up on you at the end of the month. You'll spend hours trying to untangle the backlash and trying to get everything all figured out, and receipts here and incomes here and deposit slips there and bills unpaid here, and all of this has got to be figured out. The best way to keep this stuff going is to do it regularly, on a regular basis, no less than once a week. Keeping your books posted and up to date. A good accountant or a bookkeeper will do it automatically. That's their job. They do it as it happens. They spend their day keeping the books abreast so that at any given moment we know what we're worth, what we're able to do or not do, as the case may be, and be fiscally responsible. So plan now to keep your books set up, and you put your accounts in there. You devise your chart of accounts. You set up your general ledger so that you have a full accounting of date and invoice numbers if necessary. The account number that you're talking about. See how easy, instead of writing those long names in, and every time you write a check or bring money in, you just have a code number. And this saves you time and makes the bookkeeping so much more neat and more legible and understandable for sure. And then as we keep those books abreast, and we do it each week, when the end of the month comes up, we're in no big hassle. We're right abreast of the situation. When our bank statement comes in, we're able to correlate the two, get the books balanced and the records all straight, and we're finished for the month in a minimum of time. Now, I encourage you to think along these lines and be accurate with it. Have no fear about bookkeeping. And do not be indolent about bookkeeping. A lot of people just don't see the importance of it. They're not too hep on the idea of just going through and doing a lot of arithmetic and carrying on a lot of work just to keep their money. If you don't, you're going to be in trouble. Like the young wife that her husband was most exasperated with her. She was always overspending and putting their account in the red, their checking account. She wrote as many NSF checks as she wrote good checks. And she couldn't quite comprehend the problem. And her problem was that, that she thought as long as there were blank checks in her book, that meant that there was money in the account. And she just wrote checks. Well, I've got checks so I can spend money. Never even thinking that she needed to tally up and coordinate and write down and identify every check expenditure over against their beginning balance. And it took a while to get that explained to her, and finally we got the problem curbed. But you see, we have to be responsible. We cannot be naive, and we have to give an account. And if we don't, we're going to be in sorry shambles. You'll never know where you are. You'll wind up overspending. You'll wonder where your money went. You'll wonder why you don't have any left. You wonder what's going on, and you'll always be in a quandary. This is absolutely intolerable as far as spiritual stewardship is concerned. So keep that in mind. We're going to keep our books. We're going to have a chart of account. We're going to have made our inventories. We're going to keep our general ledger now up to date weekly. We're going to have our income and our outgo all accounted for by each account number and date. And we're going to have a running figure of what we're worth at that time. This is the only way, fair way, honest way to carry on the business of the church. Now, let's go on. These books that we keep, the general ledger, the records that we have, legally, you are required to keep these things for at least 5 years. You may, especially if you have them on computer and have them on disk, you have very little or limited storage space, you could keep them forever without acquiring a lot of bulky file cabinets full of information. Either way, you are obligated to keep records for at least 5 years should you be called for any inventory from IRS or what have you. If there was something that came up in the church, it's good to have those books. We make it a practice of keeping every check that was ever written as a receipt cash receipt of all expenditures made so that no one could ever say, well, you did not pay this or pay it in full, or you misspent some money. All we have to do is look at the checks and see, did we misspend money? The records, the general records, the general ledger records, we're keeping those so that we can go back and we can see where we're coming and where we're going as far as our financial growth is concerned. And also, as I keep these records and review them, I can keep a good, accurate account on how to formulate the budget for the next year. I can go over and see where our expenses, are they falling in like we expected? Or did we find out we did not account or did not allot certain amount of money that was needful for one account? You may have realized that your utilities are going up and failed to give a good budgetary figure for that, and you wound up in the red in that end of that year in that particular account. Well, I can look in the books and see where we are. That's a good record. So keep the book. If you're interested in putting your information and you're keeping your books on computer, and I highly recommend this even for your smaller churches, this is going to be a great ease of bookkeeping. It will require minimal time, and you'll always have all of the information accurately stored at your fingertips at any moment. Now, there are all kinds of bookkeeping programs. You may be apt and able to write your own. I would think that that would take quite a doing to do so, to get one that would cover what you're doing. There are a number of good programs on the market, and should I say off the market. There are public service programs. Those programs that are free to the public, and they are public domain computer programs. We use one of those, and it's a very effective one. We'd be glad to discuss that with you privately or personally as to what you can do or how to receive it. But this little program that is used covers our general ledger program very adequately, and it does a good work for a sector of our ministry. And so we use it, and it's free. I think it costs free. You have to pay for the disc, something like $6 or $8. And then perhaps a donation to the man who wrote it. That's an honest or ethical way they operate in those things. And you send him an honorarium, I think, of $30, $40, and he sends you a whole manual printed out, puts you on the mailing list, and keeps you updated with different and new ways of upgrading that particular program. But it's a very easy, menu-driven program, easy to use, quick in its operation, and is quite comprehensive. In other words, you can adapt it to your own personal needs very, very easily. I would recommend something like this. Now, you can go to some sophisticated program. We use one called Champion. I don't have any intentions for public advertising, but this is a good one, usually acclaimed to be one of the best. It's a very expensive program, but it is a powerful program. It does everything, and it does it all instantly. It is a very accurate, easy to use program for church finances, for general ledger, and of course they have other modules for other aspects of check writing or payroll or what have you. And all of this also includes keeping, if you have to, your income tax and your Social Security. All of these things are computed for you and done automatically, and they are various modules to this rather grand financial program for a computer. But now, for an initial investment of several $1,000s or less, depending upon what you can get or use, perhaps someone would even give you a computer or let you use one and carry on your program on their computer. Now, the only problem you have here is the accuracy of privacy. Now, in this expensive program I'm talking about, they give you a security code. All of that is built in. No one can access your books until they know the security code. Punch in just like a combination lock. You punch in the security code, and then the thing opens up just like a combination lock, and you can access and use and work your books. That keeps it terribly private. Very handy device, all a part of that rather expensive program. But anyway, these things are worth and worthy your attention and thought to get involved. Whatever is needed, Now, if you don't mind keeping books longhand and keeping the general ledger, and it's not bad, or you don't have a very complicated system, you may use the single entry system. That is where you do not have an annual budgeted allotted figure, where you're going to spend $5,000 for utilities, and you start off with that, and you put that over there in the column. Every time you make a deduction from your monthly statement, it subtracts it automatically, or you subtract it if you're doing it manually, and you're always abreast of what you have spent and what you have left according to your proposed budget for that particular year. Keep that in mind. Now, your computer will do that automatically. But in any case, you need a good set of books. One of the first things you're going to do is get involved and get yourself set down and set up your books before even that you start receiving monies in. And get all of this going so that it can make it easy, and you will have an accurate set of books. There is nothing more discouraging than to try to find out what you have done with certain monies, or what you're really worth, or the bank says you've got $5,000 in the bank and you know that you have $7,000. And they say, no, you only have $5,000, and you can't figure out where that $2,000 difference is. Somebody has poor bookkeeping principles, and it's not the bank. Rarely have I found the bank to make error or entry errors in their accounting. They use a computer. Every once in a while they may put someone else's account confused with you, or they may lose a check or something like that, but basically their accounting is accurate. And usually 99% of the time, if there is an error, it's going to be with you. And if you have your books up to date, you can easily make an error. And the deal is to be able to easily find that error, so that you do not have to spend arduous hours doing a bunch of research trying to find and add up and run tape through an add machine, trying to add up and to subtract and figure out where you are. This will waste your time. You've got more to do than to find errors in bookkeeping. So keep a good set of books. Keep them 5 years. Use a computer system if you possibly can. It'll make all things work well. Now, we've got our general ledger set up, and we've got all of these principles here worked out, so to speak. We're either using a computer program or a long, big ledger sheet. If it's single entry, we're just not caring what the budgeted amount is. We're just spending it as we go and faith it in and spend it out. If it's a double entry program, we have where our budget is being used, and we're subtracting from our budget every time we spend money in that category. Let's turn now to our procedures here and talk about the accounting of offerings. I want to get a little more specific. We were talking about accounting for all the monies generally, how it must be done accurately and honestly. Now, we're going to move into an area where there's going to be a little more requirement of sensitivity to ethic, the accounting of offerings. We need to be very accurate in the accounting of offerings. All of the monies that we receive are those tithes and offerings of God's people offered unto Him. This is, as we've learned what the meaning of money is, this is their life. This represents their life for that week or 2 weeks or a month or whatever that tithe and offering is representing. This is their time, this is their talent, this is their effort, this is their commitment, this is everything that this represents their total life of stewardship in the Lord. And so when they bring their money into the house of God and offer it as the Lord does decree on the first day of the week, then we have to realize that this is a spiritually significant occasion. Therefore, it is going to require the utmost of our regard, ethic, and attention to handle that just like we would, or a surgeon would, someone who's lying on the operating table. He's not practicing on a cadaver in med school. He is now operating on a patient in a matter of life and death. And so there's a lot of attention given. Everything is done to the T. So it is with the offering and accounting. Every tithe and every offering must be rigidly accounted. This starts now right in from the way you receive the money, how you handle the money after it's received. Taking the money and just bunching it up and sticking it in a sack and throwing it in a drawer someplace and dropping an envelope or two on the floor or in the drawer or what have you, and later, months later, finding, ooh, there's somebody's tithe, is not a responsible way to handle this. We must be serious about the accountability of this money. And so we handle it as it is, God's money. I do not desecrate my Bible. I do not desecrate the things of the Lord. I do not handle them indiscreetly. I handle them in deference and in wisdom. I handle them in every consideration that these things belong to the Lord. So it is with the tithes and offerings. It'll give the people a real sensitivity and sensibility that these things are indeed important. Sloppily, indolently, carelessly handling of monies, tithes and offerings, before the people is inexcusable. When it's not before the people and we're just throwing it around where it can be mislaid, lost in the shuffle, envelopes not thoroughly emptied out, envelopes not emptied out at all, and then we have things that are hardly accounted. You're going to have enough problems accounting for offerings even when you are rigidly watching your actions and you try to interpret some hieroglyphics that's written on the offering envelope. There you have an offering envelope and it says, me, 10 cents. And so you've got to figure out by handwriting and personality who me is. That this is the way it is. Or they'll write on there John. And they expect you to know that they're John. I mean, you know, they are John, and you and they are friends. But you have 32 other Johns in the congregation. And we need to have a little more information. But in spite of that, those things, those idiosyncrasies that are going to happen to you, we are still required to account for all the offerings of the Lord accurately. Now, I'm going to say this several times. I've already said it once already. The money counters and those who handle the finances, that is, inputting it into the books, those who are counting the offerings, those who are actually counting the money, those who are making accounting of it, they must be held and kept and sworn into absolute secrecy. No one else should know what someone else's tithes and offerings are. It is a strictly personal thing. If you want to have problems in the fellowship, if you want to lose credibility and understandability with the people, just start letting this information leak out as general information. You'll lose people, and rightly so. It's a most important area. Now, when I get ready to account for tithes and offerings, I have to break it down into several areas. One of the first categories that we want to talk about in offerings, tithes and offerings, is the mode. That is, how was this money or offering made to us? Again, a computer program will have all of this ready for you. You'll just go across the line and pick out that this is number 1, it's a check. Number 2, it's cash. Number 3, it's change. Number 4, it's a postage stamp. Number 3, it's a famous painting, properties, business, whatever. Any kind of mode. In the olden days, they would pay their preachers with vegetables, and in Kentucky they use 90 proof whiskey, and they paid their pastors. Any way it comes in, you are going to have to account for it. This is the mode. It may be property. Someone may give you an automobile. Someone may provide for you a retreat area, some property. Other people may give things, equipment. They want to donate a cello to the church. The cello is worth $10,000. And this is an offering that they're giving. And so I have a category under mode. How did the money or the offering come in? Under mode, I have all of these potentials that I can do, and I have them coded so I don't have to waste a lot of time. Then, when someone comes in and says, well, I thought I gave more money, or I did not have this accounted for, you can go in and account for every item that was donated or given to the Lord. You may have something that is tangibly given for tax exemption. Someone may sell you a piece of property and it is worth something, and they give it to you for half of its worth, but would have a tax write-off for it. Someone may give you an automobile and you give them a tax-deductible receipt for it as a donation. Now, this is not illegal. This is the way it is. They give that thing to you. It's worth something. They know it's worth something, but they're giving it to the church, and they don't want money from the church. They just want to have the credit for that, whatever that offering may be. An automobile, a piece of equipment, piece of property, what have you. So I have a category in the mode for where that or how that money or that property comes in. Then you'll probably want a miscellaneous thing where some odd thing will happen, and you'll have a category for it. How the material or the money, the offering, comes in. Then I make a second area here, not only mode, but then I want to record for my sake and for theirs the purpose for the offering. The purpose for the offering. Tithes and offering. This will be 99% of what you're getting in most of the time. Tithes and offerings. I'm talking now about general first fruits offering that are made undesignated. They just give an offering. They give above their tithe. And so they just put on their envelope, number 1 or T&O or what have you. You may print your own envelopes. That's a good and neat way to do it. Have them printed and have on there all of these different designations so that they can just check it without having to do a lot of writing, and it makes it a lot easier. It's a lot neater. You don't have to decipher handwriting. They just make a check or an X in the box of what it is. And let me just read a few of the categories for giving purposes. Purpose. Tithes and offerings. Designated offerings. They may give to a designated thing. You may receive, and we do, an offering designated to another member in the family who may be in need, or they think they're in need, or they just want to bless somebody. They want to do it anonymously, and so they write on their envelope, this offering is for so-and-so, or this offering is for Children's Church, or something of that nature, a designated offering. This is the way that is. Now, all of our monies that we receive for our visiting speakers, and we say now this offering is being gathered up for our brother who is serving and ministering in our midst this week. This is a designated offering. You may even want to put in there on your computer or on your program to whom it was given. That would be accurate. But that's a designated offering. They specify, or you take up an offering for a certain thing. I take up an offering for a certain missionary. That's a designated offering. That's the only place that those funds and monies can be spent. Then you may have a building fund. Many churches do, and so people are regularly, consistently giving to the building fund, and so it will not go into the tithes and offerings. They mark on their envelope and they let you know that the purpose of this offering is for the building fund. Missions, same way. Someone may want to give $10,000 to a mission in Haiti or something like that. And so this is a designated offering, but it is specifically for missions. This will help you in gathering up your information, how that you're gathering money for missions. How much money was received in free will offerings for the subject of missions. Youth ministries, and the list is really endless of how money is received. People will give for one thing or another. If you mention a need, they'll probably respond to it and give, and so I'm going to designate that or mark it down. Organizations may give. Or they may be giving to an organization, such as the YWAM, or they may be giving to the Gideon Bible. However, and then I put a miscellaneous category to any way that the purpose of the money may be given. I have an account number for it so that we can record that, and I'll know in an instant. On my summary sheet, it says X amount of dollars given for missions, X amount of dollars given to the building fund, X amount of dollars given to this and that and the other, all in categories, a neat way to know how your money is coming in and care for it and to mark it on their giving record what they gave it for. They'll be surprised. You understand that most people, now there are a few that keep absolute rigid records on what they're doing. One brother has his own computer and he puts his own offerings on the computer. He has an up-to-date thing as we do about what he's giving for what he gives and how he gives and when he gives. That's neat. That's really nice. Most people don't. And they really lose track of how much they are or are not giving. And it's amazing. They're either way off too much or way off too little. Somebody comes in and says, "Well, I thought I gave more than that." Surely I did. You see, they're in their mind's eye giving $5 every other week, and to them that's a lot of money. They don't keep track of it, but you do. And they said, "Well, I thought I gave more." No, here it is, an itemized record. $5 cash every other week, and it adds up to so much, and this is what it is. You're going to save yourself a peck of trouble when you come in to understand that these offerings are going to be rigidly accounted for, and you can give good explanation. I mean, the books show what has transpired. This is a way to do it. I also keep a time of the time, the day or the week and the month or the year given. I want to keep a record of the time that it was given. On such and such a day, you gave so and so. Then it is very clear. Now we have another thing in the accounting of offerings that we need to consider before we close this account or this part of the study, and that is when you have offering envelopes and then you have a family that is giving. Now if you don't assign that family a number, and even if you do, then they are going to need series of envelopes. You know, you have little Junior, he's giving 8-cent tithes, and little Sally, she's giving 23-cent tithes, and Mama has some money that she's given. She's been saving up from the grocery money to this, and she puts an offering in, and then Daddy puts his tithe and the regular offering in, and so we got 6 envelopes per week coming in for one family. And you need to make a definitive decision what you're going to do. Are you going to keep a record on each individual one in your family? If you have a large church, that almost becomes impossible. You'd be forever inputting offerings. If it's less than $1, you may have to decide if it's less than $1, we're not going to consider that on our record keeping. A lot of large churches have to do it that way because of the prodigious amount of offerings, individual offerings that are coming in. People are just going to have to know that, but they need to know that and know that up front. In a smaller situation, you may be able to facilitate and have the time to record little Junior's 8-cent and Sally's 23-cent offering and record it as such in that. You may amalgamate it all in the final tally of the one family number that mother, daddy, sister, and brother have given an offering. But you need to keep record. Good way to do this also, when they reach high school or after and they get their own job, immediately they're going to have to require themselves to turn in their own income tax return. If they're in that category, then you need to have a separate account for that individual, even though he's in that same family. This is just good business practice here. And we can keep an accurate account of what's going. And this blesses the family, and it is a good record for church financial record keeping. Well, let's close it right down here.